So I think that most people know that to make a good coffee, you need a couple of ingredients. First of all, you need some good coffee beans, ideally freshly roasted whole coffee beans. But you also need good water besides that. And that is where this reverse osmosis water filter comes into play for today's video. Now, Waterdrop sent me this one and asked for me to do a review of the machine in regards to making coffee with it. And I will say that using good water is going to get you better results in your coffee and in your espresso. It's going to be more crisp, taste more clean, I think like more smooth, and in general, it'll just give you a better cup. But I really didn't have any experience in using reverse osmosis machines at all, and there is a ton to learn about it. Water treatment is like a whole science in itself. So today I'm just going to give you a brief overview of this machine, my impressions so far after having used it for a couple, 2-3 weeks, and let you know my thoughts on it. First of all, what is reverse osmosis even as a process? Well, in the machine, you've got a big filter in there. And this big filter is what does the reverse osmosis process along with a pump. So you put this guy in there. That filter is supposed to last a whole year, so that's quite nice. And the difference between reverse osmosis and something else like a Brita filter or a zero filter is that those use like gravity to allow the water to flow through the filter. This instead uses a pump, and you're going to hear that in just a minute, to force the water through a permeable membrane, and it's got really small holes in it so that only the water molecules can get through and the rest can't. Not the metals, not the chlorine, not the fluoride, and so on. So that is the idea behind reverse osmosis. You're pumping that water with force through a membrane. Now, this machine comes with I think it's a 1.25 gallon tank on it. So it's pretty big tank. It's a 4.7 liters there, and you see it's got the minimum here, and that's kind of the first negative point that I have to mention. It always leaves this much here, so you fill it up to the maximum and it uses that water, but I think it recirculates it essentially, and this is what's left in the bottom. And what's interesting is you'll see that it's got a higher TDS value than the normal water. So for example, I got my TDS meter here, and if I just take normal, this is distilled water, you're going to see that distilled water actually has 0 TDS because there's no minerals, there's nothing conductive in that distilled water. If I take my tap water, on the other hand, we have really hard water in Wisconsin. I think that's got 275 or so, well, 301 even. So that has got a very high TDS. Now the reverse osmosis is going to remove most of that. So what I've been getting here into this pitcher is about between 10 and 40 TDS. So that means it's removed a lot of the conductive minerals within the water. But anyway, this is what's left. And so you're always wasting some water. You got to dump this. After it drains it down to minimum, you got to dump it down the sink. Or you can do what my wife does, and she dumps it on some plants. And by the way, the reason that you have to dump this recirculated water is because the TDS is therefore very high. It actually gets up to be about 683. Press the hold button, 683 right there. So because the water is recirculated, TDS goes really high, and therefore you got to dump it. So let's go dump it on some plants. So here I got my tap water. I got the tank filled back up to maximum. I'm going to put that on the machine. And then you're going to hear it start the pump process. But before I do that, I want to mention that this can be a pain in the butt. We've actually got cabinets that are about, I think, 18 inches, and there's very little room actually to get this tank up and out. I can barely do it, but if you have cabinets above your kitchen countertop, that might pose an issue for you. Okay, so you can hear that the machine is now working, and you'll see that in this carafe, the volume will go slowly up as the reverse osmosis process happens. So that's pretty neat. I don't find it that loud. Now that's subjective. My wife does think that it's loud. So it's all gonna kind of depend on how you perceive the noise. I think it's relatively pleasant, but it does make noise as the pump is running. So we're just gonna let this carafe fill up. And that is a 1 liter carafe, by the way. And while it's filling up, a couple of points to mention. Number one, you should only be using municipal tap water, which is what I'm using here. My mom has got a well water and it's not recommended for that. The other thing is we're a household of 4, and I do find that you have to fill this machine up, if you're primarily using this as drinking water, a bit too often. So we fill it up minimum once a day, sometimes twice a day, and that does get to be a pain, especially if you have cabinets that are close to the top of this guy. So that is one thing to mention, but if you're a 1 or 2 person household, I think this is probably more dimensioned for that. Just my personal opinion. All right, while we're waiting for that to finish up filling that carafe, I do want to talk a little bit about what it all filters out. So I did a test with some water test strips of my normal cold tap water, untreated, and I also did a test then afterwards with the reverse osmosis water. And what I found out is that actually our tap water is not that bad. It says on our municipal website that they add fluoride and they add chlorine to the water for disinfectant. And otherwise, I thought that there was actually more stuff in the water, but it actually looks like it's fairly clean. There's not really any mentionable metals in the water. The chlorine is quite low, actually. The pH is a little bit on the higher side. The higher you go in pH is the more alkaline or basic that it is. So tap water, a little basic, and I would say the carbonate's also kind of high, and it's hard water. So what I did find out with the reverse osmosis process is that it, first of all, it reduces the hardness. It also reduces the carbonate, and it reduces the pH as well. So you get a slightly more acidic water. And what I found that does for the coffee is it does bring out the acidic notes a bit more in the coffee, makes it taste more crisp and more clean. So that is a good thing. Anyhow, it's finished. We can take that off there, and let's just see what kind of TDS we get here. Now you might need to try it in a couple of vessels because the TDS reading can get altered depending on, is there still detergent in here, how clean is the cup you're using, and stuff like that. So let's just see. What does that say on there? Can you read it?
It says 21.
21, okay. Yeah, so 21, that's pretty good. I've been getting readings anywhere between, let's say, 10 and 40 on the reverse osmosis water. And so what that means is that it's filtered out a lot of those minerals and also metals, if there would be some metals in there. Chlorine too, as well as fluoride. So what you're really getting there is a reduction in all that stuff, and that's what this reads is the conductivity of the water. So, but what does that mean? You got nice purified water, yes. You got a low TDS, a lot of things are removed, and it makes for good drinking water. My wife in particular and my kids, they quite like taking this guy out, pouring themselves a glass of water and drinking it. And so that's, obviously that's the point. But as far as using that for coffee machines, for espresso machines, one thing you do have to consider is, first of all, the taste of the water a little bit, and also your coffee or espresso machine. Because if you remove all the minerals from the water, then there's a couple things to consider. Number one, the water has then less taste. You don't have the minerals in the water to add for the taste. And that's why some people add an additive like third wave water to their reverse osmosis or to their distilled water so that they do add some minerals back in. The second thing to consider is because reverse osmosis or distilled water is so pure, water's a solvent. That means that it's really good at dissolving stuff. You put sugar in there, water in there, it dissolves it right away. Water's always trying to dissolve things. So if you have pure water, that makes it even more of a solvent. And what can happen is if you leave this in metal, it can actually leach minerals from the metal back into the water. So it can be detrimental actually to, let's say, the stainless steel lines of an espresso machine or inside a stainless steel boiler of a coffee machine, whatever. So I would recommend that if you're using this for your coffee, that you add some minerals back in, either third wave water, or what you can do is, okay, if I got 10 TDS like this, you can just add a bit more tap water back in. That's kind of a quick and dirty way, maybe like 10%. A quick and dirty way of increasing the TDS, increasing the minerals in the water. What does that read?
102.
102. Wow, that's a pretty good guess. So I've read on the internet that anywhere between 50 and 150 is a pretty good target to aim for if you're adding minerals back in. Of course, there's a lot of different thoughts on that. And really, in regards to water treatment, as I mentioned, it's a whole big science. There's businesses completely, built up around water treatment. And so that's a big, big topic. This is just kind of an introduction to this reverse osmosis machine and what I've noticed so far about it. All right, with all of that being said, there are a couple more things to mention about this machine, okay? I talked about the main purpose of the machine, and that is to, put water here into the carafe, and then you can use the carafe. It does, however, also have a spout, and so you can let out room temperature water. Now, I found that when I do that, it's somewhere around, 80 degrees. It's summertime. Stop. You can also let out hot water. So if you put this up to 203 degrees Fahrenheit, you can emit hot water. If you want that, for example, for a long black. And additionally, you can set it up for cold water. So if I hit cold, and if I hit cold plus the button at the same time for a few seconds, then it actually, you can see there's a snowflake blinking there. Then actually what it's doing is turning on, you can hear it, a little refrigerator inside, some kind of cooling method. Okay, but what I found is that cooling method doesn't get it very cold. If I remember right, it got it down to about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And as far as the heating method is concerned, there's also a heating element inside. That does get it eventually up close to the target temperature, but not quite. And it does take quite a while to ramp up. So honestly speaking, I don't find the hot water very practical, nor the cold water. But I just like drinking here out of the carafe anyway. All right, and of course I would be remiss to not do a taste test of the reverse osmosis water compared to my tap water. So let's go ahead and do that. So reverse osmosis. Tastes pure, tastes like normal purified water, like what you get as bottled water. And my tap water in comparison, cold tap water, it does taste different. A little bit. I can taste just a little bit of chlorine in the water. Yeah, somehow the reverse osmosis does taste a little bit softer somehow. It tastes purified in that I don't taste any chlorine or anything like that. So it is, for taste-wise, a win over normal tap water. And as I mentioned, my wife and my kids, they do prefer the reverse osmosis taste over our tap water as well. Alrighty guys, thanks so much for watching the video. I hope it was interesting for you. You know what, write down your comments and thoughts about water and water treatment in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, give it a like. Also consider subscribing to the video, because if you do, then I know that this is an interesting topic. Until next time, I say happy coffee drinking, happy espresso drinking. Bye now.